We are going to use an equilateral triangle to find the lengths of the sides of a 30, 60, 90 triangle. And in an equilateral triangle, we're going to label our sides. Sides A, B, BC, and AC. So in our equilateral triangle, I know that each of the angles is 60 degrees. So if we have all of our 60-degree angles here, and the top is a 60 also, when I draw my altitude coming down to the base from point A, that altitude will split the base into two equal parts. It will also split the top angle into two equal angles. In this case, each of the angles would be 30 degrees. My altitude we're going to label as x, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign the length of the sides of the triangle as a nice simple number to use. I'm going to make the length 2. Doesn't matter if it's 2 inches, 2 centimeters, it does not matter. And since it's equilateral, I do know that each of my sides is 2 also. Every side is 2. Now, back to the altitude. The altitude splits the base in half. It's perpendicular to the base also. So if you look at my triangle, what I have here is triangle going from A to B, and we're going to label that bottom part M. ABM, triangle ABM, is a right triangle. This is a right triangle in there. So what we have is this. In the right triangle, I do know that MB has a length of 1 because the two parts on the bottom have to be equal. I also know that this side, which is the hypotenuse in my yellow triangle, has to be 2 because the triangle to begin with was equilateral. This side that was 1 is called the shorter leg of the yellow triangle. X is the long leg in the yellow triangle. And in order to find x, because we have a right triangle and we have 2 known sides and 1 unknown, what I can do is I can use the Pythagorean theorem and say that x squared plus 1 squared equals 2 squared. When I solve this, I get that x squared plus 1 equals 4 after I square each side. I subtract 1 from both sides here. I get that x squared equals 3, and then I square root both sides. So I get that x is the square root of 3. So I'm going to put that in here. X is the square root of 3. Now I'm going to take my yellow triangle numbers and I'm going to move them over to this smaller triangle here. This angle was 30, this was a 90, and this was a 60. My sides, my hypotenuse again was 2, my short leg was 1, and my long leg was the square root of 3. Now it doesn't matter whatever sides your 30, 60, 90 triangles start off with, your sides are always in the ratio of a 1 to square root of 3, meaning this is the ratio between the short side, the hypotenuse, and the long leg. So the short leg and the long leg and the hypotenuse, it's a 1 to 2 to square root of 3 ratio. So what we have here is this. If you have your 30, 60, 90 triangle, doesn't matter what sides you start off with here. If the short side is 5, the hypotenuse will be twice 5 because it's a 1 to 2 ratio. This would have to be 10, and the long leg will be 5 square roots of 3 because it's 1 times that square root of 3. Now, let's go back to this original diagram here. It's a 1 to square root of 3 ratio. Let's do this. Let's put a 1n, a 2n, and a square root of 3n ratio. So if our side was 5, 1 times 5 is 5, 2 times 5 is 10, the square root of 3 times 5 is 5 square roots of 3. Now if we look at this one more time here, if this side is 7, the hypotenuse will be twice 7, which is 14, and this side will be the square root of 3 times 7, which is 14 square roots of 3.